You're listening to episode 10 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm so excited to have with me today my client Erika, who's going to share with you the transformation that she experienced in her physical, mental, and spiritual health as a part of the Fed and Fearless coaching program. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, I'm your host, and I'm super excited today because I have one of my favorite clients on the show today who's going to be sharing with you her experience as part of the Fed and Fearless coaching program. So I'm going to introduce you to Erika. Erika is a wife and a mom of two, and she lives in Telluride, Colorado, which is a rural, remote resort town in Southwest Colorado. In Telluride, it's easier to ski and mountain bike than it is to get to a grocery store. She works in rural economic development and is passionate about her Catholic faith, people, writing, and horses. Erika and her husband have ridden their bicycles thousands of miles internationally. Being both of Lithuanian descent, they suffered many years of Lithuanian Saturday school and are now raising bilingual children. Erika is such an amazing person and her story is so inspirational. So I'm so excited for you to hear it. I loved chatting with her. I feel like I could have talked for hours with her on this episode. So without further ado, here is Erika. All right, everybody, I am so excited to have with me on the podcast today my client and someone who I've just loved getting to interact with and support over the last, I think it's been like a year and a half at this point. Her name is Erika. So welcome to the show, Erika.
Hi, Laura. Thank you.
So happy to have you here. And I know that you have kind of I want to say an amazing and inspiring story to tell people about some of the things that you've been through in your life and where you're at currently with the progress that you've made in just the way that you see yourself and the way that you treat your body over the last year plus of our time together. So I know that what you share today is going to be super inspirational for so many women out there who are dealing with some of the stuff that you've dealt with in the past. So just to get started, I know that since you're not a famous internet person, most, if not all the people listening to this show, unless you've shared the episode with them, won't know who you are. So do you mind just giving us a quick overview of who you are and just tell us a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you better?
Sure. So I like to introduce myself first as a wife and a mom of two young children, a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. And of course, that I am very much a proud child of God. I'm a practicing Catholic. We are working very hard to raise our kids to love God and to turn to God and pray. So it's been a journey, especially since we have ended up in a very small, remote resort town in rural Southwest Colorado, it's Telluride, if anybody knows of it, and an amazing place to play, but very difficult to get out and about because we're so far away from everything, 7 hours from any city. And we ended up here because my work is really always been focused on people and communities and building sustainable communities. So I've had this great opportunity of working on rural economic development out here. And at the same time, working to create a community that will survive some of the major changes that we see ahead of us with different the coal mining operations out here, et cetera, that have been closing down. So I love what I do, and I love where I live, but it's also a challenge, and quite the interesting turn of events in our family's history, to be honest. We are outdoor enthusiasts. We're bicycle adventurous. My husband and I have traveled many, many countries, many, many miles on our bicycles. And he's introduced me to mountain biking, and we ski and all of these wonderful things. And the last thing I think that's pretty critical to who I am is my Lithuanian background. We're a bilingual family. We are very proud of our immigrant heritage, and our kids speak Lithuanian only at home. So we're just a kind of an eclectic family that is always outside.
That is very true. I remember one time, I forget what call it was, but you showed up for one of our group coaching calls, and I was like, is she on a ski lift right now? So you are definitely my most outdoorsy client. And I've mentioned to Erika before that my husband used to live in Colorado. He was in Vail for a good chunk of his time there. And when he found out I had a client in Telluride, he's like, can we visit her? I would love to go to Telluride. Like, it's just, I think it's like one of those places that, especially if you're from Colorado, it's like, you know, people know that it's really awesome skiing, snowboarding, even during the summer. I'm sure there's a lot going on outdoors. So my husband would definitely love to come visit you at some point if we have the opportunity, as well as I would. But yeah, so Erika is super outdoorsy and very, very active. Even just, I think you were dropping your kids off, right? For something when you were on that ski. So your kids are super active. So just a very active family. And I love the fact that you get so much joy out of that. It's so much, and that's something that I think makes you a little bit different than a lot of the people I work with, is that your exercise, I would say, if not all the time, at least most of the time, is really just about enjoying God's creation and enjoying being active and enjoying moving your body, and not necessarily it being something about like, I need to burn calories today, or I need to like, you know, go to the gym to like check off my box, or, you know, my to-do list or something like that. So that was a kind of an interesting challenge with you because, as I'm sure we'll get into, I think that high level of activity was something that you didn't realize was contributing to some of the health issues that you were dealing with. And it was something that we didn't want to change, which you can tell the audience more than I can tell what your life was like before we started working together, because I know that you were struggling with some specific health issues that led you to me. And I think in hindsight, we can agree that they were at least partially related to how active you were.
Right. Yes, exactly. I think it's kind of a long history, and it's led up to the point where, being outside and constantly just moving is it's just a natural part of my life that it never really seemed like I was all that active. It sounds really odd to say that, but you know, what do you mean riding my bike to work counts as activity? You know, it just felt like that's how I commute. But my history really begins with, and it's, you know, this chronic trouble that I've had, but it really begins with a series of bad choices growing up and a misunderstanding of what does health actually mean. I had a sister, she passed away when she was 22 and I was 19, but growing up, she suffered a lot in terms of physical appearance. She was anorexic and bulimic, and her habits really left a mark on me, and I always looked up to her. So for me, it was, well, she's only drinking Diet Coke, I should only drink Diet Coke, or, you know, that kind of thing. And even though she and I are very different. And so I ended up with a lot of really bad habits. And at the same time, once I entered puberty, of course, it's like anyone, started having these hormonal changes and acne, and, you know, and because of the combination, now that I realize of the stress around these changes, and personality being a fairly closed person, not liking to really talk about things that were bothering me, so compounding, and then of course the skin issues, and seeing my sister in these, you know, kind of fluctuating weight, and thinking that's what I should be doing. So ending up with a diet of literally Diet Coke and candy corn, which is so gross when I think about it. But that's what I thought. I didn't want a lot of calories, but I needed energy, and I was thirsty, but the carbonation helped me fill up. Now, I never was anorexic or bulimic myself, but definitely had disordered tendencies. So, of course, all of this led to a really long-term antibiotic use. And, of course, not realizing that was causing all kinds of internal gut issues that I just never addressed. And so these things just compounded and stayed with me for years, decades. And finally, I'm getting to my 30s. I'm thinking, why is this still a problem? I'm on birth control pill and this is helping, and then it's not. And I'm getting, get a couple of master's degrees, and just the stress is high. And I just, anything that I eat is starting to make me sick. And so then I start restricting the foods I'm eating because I'm thinking that this is the solution, and never realizing that all of this chronic history was really wreaking havoc on my body. Now, with all of that happening at the same time, my understanding was, well, if I exercise a lot and I eat fewer calories than I'm supposed to, what I think I'm exercising, then I'll never have an issue. I'll never gain weight. I'll stay the way I am, and everything's fine. Well, yeah. So you can kind of get this mental picture of this complete mess of a person thinking I'm moving forward in life, and I'm a very strong personality. So, you don't really know all these internal turmoils that are happening, and if you're looking at me from the outside. But it got to the point, I'm turning 40, and I'm thinking, there's something seriously wrong here. I don't know why I'm off the rails when I think I'm doing everything right. And my ultimate desire at that point, I have a little girl. She's 5. At the time, I think when I started talking to Laura, she was 3. And I thought, this is not something I could ever, ever wish upon my daughter. And I need to figure this out so that I'm not passing this on. And so, so this is kind of the mental state I'm in, where I'm not eating enough. I don't realize I'm not eating enough. I'm doing all this outdoor activity and feeling not great, and wondering what's really going on. So my understanding about God's plan is that we're supposed to trust in God, but that doesn't mean we just sit there and do nothing. It means people will fall into your life at the right time, but you have to trust and recognize those people. And Laura fell into my life. You did. And I grabbed the opportunity, and I said, look, this is it. This is how we're changing things. And that is the origin story.
Well, I want to make sure you know that I don't think that you were a complete mess when you came to work with me. I think you are the kind of person that has pretty high expectations of yourself. So Erika's very intelligent and capable of doing things, and has been amazing to work with just because of how you've taken what we talk about and you actually implement it, which is always, I think, easier said than done. So I think the challenge that you were having was believing you were doing the right stuff, but not seeing the results from that action, right? And that can be pretty insidious, because I think most people assume that if anyone's dealing with health issues, it's because they're ignorant, or they're like not taking care of themselves, or they're living off Diet Coke and candy corn. And that was definitely not you. And I think, maybe from the outsider's perspective, you were active, you are health conscious, you were eating, what probably to most people looked like a super healthy diet. So I think most people would probably say that you were doing everything right. And maybe if you had even talked to a doctor, they might have said, oh, you're fine, you're doing everything fine, so don't worry about it. And it wasn't until you and I met and we talked about what you were dealing with and what your lifestyle was like that we started to identify a big issue, or at least a couple big issues that hadn't been dealt with. And definitely some things that were out of your control, like, having a history of antibiotic and birth control use. You didn't know that those medications were going to negatively impact your gut. So there was a lot going on that you didn't have control over, and a lot going on that you didn't realize was not the appropriate way to be dealing with the issue. So again, I want to make sure you're not giving yourself too hard of a time, because I think it's easy to look back and say, oh, I can't believe I was doing all that stuff. But I just don't think you knew, right? I mean, it's not like you knew what was going on and you were like, I'm not changing, like you, I'm sure would have done, you did basically do anything that needed to be done to solve the problem.
Right. And I think, a lot of it comes to, the internet is such an incredible thing because you can find whatever you want, but you can also find whatever you want.
You can find anything, literally anything.
And this is my opinion on something, and I'm going to read everything that agrees with my opinion. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just validating everything that I ever thought. And, I remember that conversation we had about chicken skin, and in my head I said, or I think I even told you, I was like, no, it's bad for you. And you said, well, who told you that?
Do you want to elaborate? Do you want to elaborate for our listeners what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. So we had a coaching call a little while back, and we were talking about what is appropriate eating, what's healthy to eat, and I was saying that I actually felt better when I was eating more fat and fewer carbs, so no carbs. And I think the conversation was going towards, well, how do you add more fat into your diet? And I was saying, well, there's nuts and oils. And I think, and Laura said, well, do you ever eat the chicken leg with the skin on? And I said, no, because that's not good for you. And you said, well, who told you that? Because that's not true. And it was this like aha moment where, well, I've read that on the internet, it's cholesterol or something, and I don't know. I did my self-research and it validated the fact that if I eat chicken skin, it's going to make me fat or it's going to make me unhealthy somehow. Well, I can't tell you. I went home that night and I sure as heck I had that leg with the skin on. I thought, I've been missing this all my life.
Well, and I think to put it into a little context for people, one of your big challenges was the fact that you are so active and were eating, quote unquote, like clean eating food or like healthy food that wasn't providing enough calories for how active you were. And honestly, out of the people that I've worked with, you probably had some of the highest calorie needs of any woman that I work with because of just your day-to-day lifestyle being so active. It's not just going to the gym. It's like, riding your bike to work, doing hiking, all that stuff. So the challenge that Erika and I were working through was how do we get more calories in the context of some digestive issues. And, and that's where like the carbs versus fat decision came in. And as I'm sure a lot of people know, I'm not anti-keto, but I'm not super into the idea of women eating super low carb. And I also want people to feel good when they eat and not have to stuff themselves on tons of volume. So when somebody needs like 3,000 calories a day, usually adding more fat is a really easy way to get there. And so for Erika, it was like trying to come up with ways to bump up her calorie intake. And we talked about, well, what about like fattier cuts of protein? And that's where the chicken skin thing came in. And I think I remember asking like why you were avoiding chicken skin, mostly to understand if it was like a flavor preference or if it was like a belief that was inaccurate. Because as an example, my husband does not like the skin on the poultry. And I'm like, you're crazy, first of all. Second of all, like if you really didn't like it, I don't want somebody to eat something that they don't like. But if you're like, oh, that's not good for me because it's going to make me gain weight. But the whole point is that we're looking for higher calorie foods. That was where this belief based on something you had read on the internet or heard from a doctor 20 years ago or like whatever it came from was in direct conflict with the actual goal that we were working towards. So I think something that this is a great example of is an opportunity to question why you're doing what you're doing. Because again, if you were like, oh, I just think chicken skin's disgusting, I'd be like, okay, no chicken skin then. We don't have to worry about that. But if it's like questioning, well, why are you avoiding it? And you have no very clear reason why, then you get to expand what's possible for you and what can be healthy for you and have more of a say in terms of what you're doing and not just be following all these arbitrary rules that don't actually benefit you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, that bigger picture of the calorie intake, I think such an eye-opening thing because it's, again, ingrained for so many years that you eat fewer calories, you exercise, you will never have a weight issue. And that has been totally debunked since starting to work with you and being part of the coaching program.
Well, and I think also expanding the idea of what healthy means, because just avoiding weight gain or losing weight, I think is so easy to use that as your metric for whether or not you're healthy. And internally, I know you were dealing with a lot of dysfunction physically, like just things that were not feeling good, and issues that probably had been going on for years at that point that maybe weren't 100% triggered by undereating and overexercising, but they were definitely not helped by that. And it was kind of putting your system at almost a handicap to try to deal with those issues on inadequate fuel. And like I said a few minutes ago, because your lifestyle, it's a lifestyle activity. It's not like, hey, just go to the gym less, or like, I didn't want to say stop exercising because it was like, that was your life. It's like, what would you do in Telluride if you can't exercise? So the only other option we had was to bump up the fuel. And so that's where that decision came from. So yeah, I think a lot of what we ended up talking about, other than like some specific kind of like functional medicine, nutrition therapy stuff, was the concept of asking like, why are you doing what you're doing, and what's the actual value of that choice, and is it valuable? And if it's not, then let's take that out of your decision-making process for food. So I wanted to talk a little bit about right before we started working together. And actually, because I think you have to remind me, I think you were one of my clients that we were working with each other privately. And then my Fed and Fearless program was being created, and I invited you because I knew that you'd be like a perfect fit for it. What was it like for you when you were deciding whether or not to invest in the group?
It was, there were, I think, a couple of deciding factors. I knew I wanted to keep, and I had a lot of things to work through, clearly. I mean, we've been working for, I guess, 9 months maybe, because you're right. I think we started in January, and then I signed up with you again December for the next year for Fed and Fearless. And so there was just so much to uncover. It was just peeling back the onion. And I mentioned this earlier, I've never really been very good about sharing kind of a lot of deep-seated things inside. I'm like, I'll just deal with them privately kind of thing. And I've gotten a lot better now about opening up. And I knew that there's a lot of value and healing that comes from sharing that story and listening to others too, because there's, the way that it was presented to me as a women working together and supporting each other, but also learning together, really resonated with me. It's not something I'd done before, and anything that I had been working or doing before clearly wasn't the answer. So this very well could be, or at least, a step in the right direction. Again, it fell into my lap right at the right time. So for me, that was a no-brainer. Of course, we can't go without saying that there's the monetary side of it, but, my husband is fully supportive of me and of our health together and our family. And he knows that I've struggled for a long time. So he had no issues whatsoever. And it wasn't so much the amount as much as, knowing that I was going to take advantage of this, because it's very easy to say, oh, I'll work on it later, or I'll catch up on this, or I don't really need it, I can do this myself. And, ultimately I said to myself, I have been trying to do this myself for decades, and this is where it's led me. And this is clearly meant to be the next step. And there is really something beautiful about knowing that you're not unique. It's a kind of a funny thing to say, but that the other women that you're talking to have stories that are so similar, and you think, well, goodness gracious, what have I been worried about? I mean, I'm first of all, I'm not alone. And when you say it out loud, suddenly there's that dawning of, I say this out loud and it has no power. And having that, good job, Erika, from all the women in the group kind of writing to you that, or gosh, I'm sorry you're feeling this way today. You need that. Women are communal creatures. We're mothers, we're nurturers. And so we can't be isolated. We just can't.
Yeah. And I think even from my own experience being in group programs versus having a private mentor versus like having the relationships I have in real life, like there's something about being around other people that are working on the same challenges that you're working on. And even having like a little bit of that anonymity in a way. It's kind of strange. It's like you're in this group and everybody's working towards the same outcome, and you can share stuff that you're struggling with. And you also know like, hey, like none of these people are judging me because they don't even know me, right? Like, it's not like they're like my next door neighbor or someone at church that's going to be like, oh, you told me this the other day and now I'm like going to think about you differently. So, and not that that happens. Like, I would hope that, you know, none of my friends at church, if I shared something with them, would be like, oh, now I can't be friends with you anymore or something like that. But I know that that happens. So it can be a little bit scary to share struggles with people that are super close with you like that. So I think it's a nice stepping stone if you're not used to sharing stuff, to be able to be in a group that, one, everybody's empathizing because they're in it themselves and they're not going to be judgmental because like they're doing it too. So it's not like anybody is better than anybody else or worse than anybody else. And then there's also that level of like, hey, I can share this here and this isn't going to like get back to my parents or get back to my husband or something. It's like a super safe space for me to be open about what I'm dealing with. And I think you also get some extra acknowledgement of challenges that sometimes you share stuff with people that have not dealt with what you're dealing with. And they're just like, why are you bothered by that? Or like, why is that so hard for you? So this is, and like I said, I mean, I've been in a lot of different coaching programs. I actually just wrapped up recording an episode about the value of mentorship and being in a group. So I just personally think that the opportunity is really awesome. And that was one of the big reasons why I invited you, even though we were working together privately, because I knew that there would be an extra level of value that I would not be able to provide to you just in our private sessions together. So I'm glad that you had that experience that I was hoping that you would have.
Oh yeah. Without question. It was a super experience and just a fun journey too.
Well, and I just want to give Erika some credit because, again, as I was saying earlier, she is one of those people that does the work, which, you know, as much as I would love to say that all of my clients do the work and you know, are committed to taking the action, sometimes, you know, I will work with some people who it's more of like a therapy session than an actual coaching session. And so Erika's always been very good about, you know, showing up with the intention of taking action. And I also just wanted to give you some credit for being participatory in the group. Because like you said, I mean, if you're not the kind of person that's used to sharing, the fact that you were willing to share with the group, I think made a big impact, not only on your results, but also in the group culture itself. And I know you've made an impact on the other women in the group through what you were willing to share. And then even just jumping on this podcast, I mean, this has got to be like, you know, a big step up for somebody who's not used to sharing things. Being able to do this, I think, says a lot about your commitment to personal development. And so I just wanted to give you a little kudos for being able to go above and beyond what I think a lot of other people are willing to do when it comes to changing their life and changing their experience and then being able to share that with others. So I would love if you could share some of the biggest lessons that you learned through the work that you did in the coaching program, other than the ability to enjoy chicken skin for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it really comes down to it never really having understood the fact that we are so much more than our bodies. You know, I think there's the physical, the mental, and the spiritual pieces of who we are that if you ignore any one of those three, you're going to go way off balance and off the rails. And speaking from my own experience, it's always been this focus on physical health. I got to exercise. I got to make sure I'm eating healthily, blah, blah, blah. And well, the mental stuff, who cares? And it took me a long time to figure out that my spiritual health is actually the most important if you're really going to focus on those three, because what's more eternal than your spiritual side of you? So, you know, but really taking that approach, you know, as we did in the program, okay, so take care of the physical piece. You know, we looked at that, we debunked a lot of these myths, we figured out what does real health mean to us, and diving into that for me, really, I found that it meant that it wasn't about how much I weighed at all. It was about what is the impact I'm having on my family, you know, so that if I'm having a day where I'm not feeling well, if something hurts or I ate something I don't feel well, guess what? It reflects pretty quickly on how I'm interacting with my kids, because I don't have the patience, I don't have the energy, and I don't want that, and so really, what is, kind of focusing on that physical, but you can't, we quickly learn that the mental piece of it, reframing your mind around what is real health, and allowing those two pieces to really merge together, is so critical to being in a safer place mentally and physically. And then above and beyond all that, what wraps around those two things is that we're not meant just for this world, walking, hiking, whatever. That's a beautiful piece of what we can do, but we're part of this great plan that means we have a fuller purpose, and figuring out what is that purpose, and trusting that is ultimately, where we're headed. I mean, all these things are so critical. So that, just putting it all out there and having these conversations, it kind of was just kind of these dawning moments of, oh yeah, I don't, so if I don't exercise today, it's not going to change my physical well-being. And in fact, it might be really good for my mental well-being today, because I'm just too tired, or gosh, my body's not feeling great and I just want to relax, so it's so intricately related. And so I think I just didn't realize that until really having these conversations in the program.
Yeah. And you expressed that really beautifully, just the idea of the physical health piece does matter. And I feel like that's part of the challenge of creating a program like the one that we created, or Fed and Fearless, is like, I do actually believe that food and exercise are important. And, as much as I want to say that, oh, just like eat what you want and don't think about it, and like just listen to your body and that kind of thing, I feel like there is a level of, first of all, discipline, depending on where you're coming from. Like if you're not eating well, you're like, if you're just living on candy corn and Coke, like just as an example, that's not going to help you feel your best. That's not going to give you great energy and good digestive health and all that. So yeah, there might be some discipline that needs to happen to change that kind of behavior. And on the flip side, if you're just kind of going with what you're used to, and maybe your appetite's not even driving appropriate eating. So I know that was one of the challenges you and I worked through, is this idea that like, hey, sometimes your appetite's not enough to tell you what your body needs, especially if you've been struggling for years with, digestive health issues or under eating and that kind of thing. So having the discipline to say, this needs to get dealt with, and this needs to get whatever beliefs I have need to be challenged, and I need to be willing to try new things. That is something that's very important when it comes to improving physical health, so that you can focus on the other stuff. And that was something that when I created the program, I had to make a decision about what came first. And I decided to go with the diet and exercise piece first, because I believe that if you're not feeling well, or if you're not feeling yourself, or, your gut hurts all the time, or your hormones are all over the place, it is hard to actually tap into mental and spiritual wellness. It's hard to ask yourself the tough questions about what are the beliefs that I have that are changing the way that I operate, or, what is my bigger purpose? Like if you don't feel good physically, it's going to be very difficult to make progress in those other areas. And like you said a few minutes ago, being hyper focused on our bodies is not ideal either. And I don't think health requires that level of focus. I think there really should be the goal of making things as simple as possible and minimizing how much effort you're putting in. But at the end of the day, like if you don't believe that there's something else out there than just having this, healthy, thin body, then it's going to be really hard for you to have mental well-being, for you to have spiritual well-being, and for you to be able to, look at your life and really feel proud of what you're spending your time doing. So it is kind of funny how they all kind of wrap into each other, and you can't separate one and just fix one and not change the others. But it's, I think like you said, the number one thing is spiritually, how healthy are you? Because there's lots of people out there that are physically very ill, but they still live a life of purpose. And there's a lot of people out there that physically on the outside, they look healthy, but internally they're a mess. And, I think, if I had to choose, I'd rather be the one that feels positively about my life and has a physical disability or illness versus the other way around. So I just think that's really cool that you were able to see how those three pieces intertwine so heavily, and seeing that there is, ways that you can approach all three that actually, it's almost like a synergistic effect where like improving one then allows you to improve the other.
Yeah. And I think that there's this ultimately comes down to where do you find the greatest peace and greatest joy? And I'm realizing that it only comes from that faith, because the body, it gets old. We're all going to end up in the same place. We all know this, and if the only consistent thing in my life is faith that there's a greater plan, and that I hopefully will end up, in heaven, which is the ideal option, that brings me peace, because that is the only thing that doesn't change. And if, coming to the realization that my body will change and is constantly changing. And if I look at in the mirror every single day and focus on, oh gosh, I got a breakout this morning, or something feels tight or doesn't feel tight, that does nothing for me. It stresses me out, and it doesn't do anything for the people around me. And I don't want to be remembered in a way that's all I cared about, because it doesn't do anything for other people.
Well, and it also negatively impacts your experience of life as well. I mean, if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you say to yourself is, oh, I look old, or, oh, I look fat. Like, how do we think we're going to interact with our kids or our spouses or people at work or people that we run into on the street if like the first thing we're thinking is how much we don't like ourselves? So you're not only negatively impacting their experience of life because you're in a grouchy mood, or you're just like impatient because you're in that negative headspace, but then you're not enjoying the relationship either, because you're thinking more about like, oh, how do I look in these pants, or like, what does my skin look like, as opposed to, oh, my kids are like, I get to interact with them today, or I get to like make an impact on the people at work, or, whatever kind of things that we're actually focusing on in terms of serving and relating with others, as opposed to like trying to be this, outside shell of a person that looks a certain way, but has nothing to offer internally. So I feel like it's just in our society, it's so culturally expected that women especially like attend to their appearance and look a certain way. And I'm not saying that there isn't pressure to do that, or that it's easy to just be like, oh, I don't care anymore. Because there's definitely times where I'm like, oh no, I'm breaking out, or I hope my skin's better for this event I have to go to, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's like, I know that the impact I'm having on people is not whether or not I had a pimple, right? Like, or, if I'm getting a little wrinkly, it's like, okay, well, how is that, the only thing that's negatively impacting that is if I choose to interpret that as a bad thing. So I think it's just being able to have that recognition that, yeah, you don't just flip a light switch and all of a sudden you just love your body and you never think a negative thing about yourself, but it's being able to catch that when it's happening and be like, no, this is not the way I'm going to live my life. Like, it's fine. Like, maybe I don't feel like I look my best today, but that actually has no meaning except for the meaning that I give it. So I know that can change your life as well as the lives of those around you for the better. And the people that I like working with are the ones that want to have an impact on the world, which I know that's the case for you. So I would love for you to share just what are the actual results that you got as a part of this program, physical, mental, spiritual. Like, what were some things that you saw change as you started to change the way that you approached your physical, mental, and spiritual health?
Right. So I think it goes without saying that, there were some definite physical challenges that I had that we had to fix. I mean, from the very basic, why was it that everything I ate made me feel sick, bloated and et cetera. And the skin issues were clearly a reflection of those issues. digestive issues, so diving into the actual science of what was happening was so critical because, couldn't figure anything else out without addressing the physical science of it and finding out that, there was some serious gut dysbiosis going on and balancing that out and some of the detoxification with hormones and as well as a candida overgrowth. These things were real. And in the challenge of learning how to talk to my doctor, who was just like, your typical skeptic, oh, that stuff's not real. Oh, your symptoms aren't really something you should really worry about, that kind of thing. And learning how to talk to my doctor, or ask for what I need to advocate for myself. And that was really important and something I'm going to take away with me for forever. So addressing those issues and getting them sorted opened up the opportunity to really explore now a more deeper understanding of, letting the physical being not only get sorted, but also not be the main focus anymore. Now that I feel better, let's dive deeper into, letting go of some of these deep-seated mindsets. And I'll bring up that example of when I was at church one morning and the deacon's wife came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, are you expecting?" And it crushed me. It really, really crushed me because I don't look at myself and think, "Ugh, I look like I'm pregnant." But if somebody else says that to me, oh my gosh, what do I look like to other people? That was my first mindset, my first thought. Oh my gosh, what's wrong? Why do I look like this? And I brought that to the group, and Laura, you coached me through that, and realizing that there's a lot of the science behind the neurons and how they fire. I thought that was really fascinating. The idea that you can reframe your brain to fire differently, which is very helpful because I do love science of anything. But also did it, and I think about it now and it doesn't bother me anymore. I can honestly say that whole experience, I don't care. And it was, for all I know, like we had talked about, I was slouching that day. And I actually do have a problem with that. I'm trying to work on that. So, that's fine. That's good because it's actually good for me to be focused on ensuring that, I'm better posture is better for my digestion and my spine. So, but the purpose, the real aspect of, how it made me feel at the time, and I'm glad it happened now because it brought up the fact that I still have some work to do, but that's okay. So I think the major result there, not only figuring out what are some of the major issues scientifically that I need to fix physically, which we've worked on, and certainly that includes not only supplements and kind of an approach to eating and make sure I eat enough for the healing, but also then now the mental piece where, okay, those kinds of comments shouldn't affect me. And then the spiritual side of it, that has been kind of a constant study and realizing that what I absolutely love is this, and this kind of came from a comment you made, Laura, where you said, why is it that we talk about diversity and yet everybody wants to look the same? And I thought that was such a profound comment. And it really, I've been thinking about that a lot. And now I was in a conversation with my sister-in-law, and she says, we know that God made us all perfect. God doesn't make mistakes. So why do we keep trying to fix something that's already perfect? And I thought, yes, of course, we have to be taking care of this body that we were given. But the spiritual part of it is so critical because once you realize that there's more than this, it all comes together. So I think the results are truly a sense of peace, in sense just feeling physically better and being just joyful about the fact that I have a healthy family, a great life, and great friends and great opportunity.
Well, I'm just like sitting here like speechless because that was so awesome to hear. And I'm like, what do I want to even say with that? Because there was so much good stuff. And that's, just going back real quick to the physical piece, with there actually being issues from a physiological perspective that needed to be dealt with. That's where, I don't want people to think that, oh, if you have issues, like just accept that. And like, oh, if your skin's breaking out cyclically, or you have gut issues and you're getting bloated after every meal, like, oh, you should just be, accepting of your body and not try to change anything. Like, I would never say that. And I feel the same way about weight loss for people that feel like, their body would be healthier if they lost some weight. I feel like it's important to approach those physical challenges separating your self-worth from the physical challenge, right? So like you having acne breakouts, we don't want to just say, oh, just accept yourself the way you are and don't worry about it, because there was stuff going on and there was stuff that needed to be dealt with that was reflecting in your skin health. But I also don't want it to be a situation where every time you have a pimple and you wake up and you have a breakout and you're like, oh no, I hate the way I look. Like, why do I look like this? This sucks. Like having that mindset of like, oh, now that I have a breakout, my whole day is going to be ruined. We don't want that to happen either. So I want to be able to separate physical challenges from self-worth and being able to say, hey, we can work on fixing something without it being something that triggers negative self-talk and belief about who you are as a person. And that kind of plays into that mindset piece when you mentioned your experience when your pastor's wife asked you if you were pregnant. And I think one of the questions I asked you was like, well, what's the meaning that you're giving that? Because I think you had said that the first meaning that came up was that, oh, well, that means I'm fat and that people think I'm fat. And like, that's what, that's why she thought I was pregnant. And then we started thinking about, well, what else could that have meant? Like what other possibilities might have been the reason that she asked that? And then also saying like, okay, well, let's say it was because you've put on some weight and that you have some extra belly fat that you didn't have before. Then what does that mean? So, being able to really explore the meaning that we're giving things that are really like, they don't have any meaning until we give it meaning, right? So it's like being able to kind of take a step back and look at our reactions and say, okay, I reacted to something that there's a lot of different ways I could have interpreted that, or that maybe she interpreted it. And, I just happened to go with the one that I'm used to thinking because of that neurological connection. And then once I realized that there's a lot of different ways that could have been intended, even if it was because of the thing that I thought it was, that still is a reaction that I get to choose and a response that is entirely up to me. I get to decide what that meaning is from that experience. And I think it's really cool that you're able to look back at it now and actually have gratitude for the experience because of the meaning that you now have associated with it. Because now the meaning you've given it is, hey, that's not how I want to live my life anymore. I don't want to have that kind of reaction. I don't want somebody's innocent words to create that much turmoil in my soul. If somebody says that to me, I don't want to be like, devastated by it. And recognizing that you do have the power now to change the way that you react to things, I think is a huge win. So I just think like, I love you sharing your story with all of this, because again, we're separating the three things. And then we're also saying that they combine. So it's like, hey, your physical health does not change who you are, but there's also things that can be done. And if you want to feel better, if you want to, maximize your health, there's ways to do it that don't revolve around self-deprecation, self-hatred, like, trying to motivate yourself by saying that you're terrible, like any of that stuff. And also focusing on, okay, even if I have acne, even if I am bloated after a meal, even if I'm having irregular cycles, like whatever kind of issue that somebody's dealing with, even if that's happening, that doesn't change who you are. That doesn't change who God says you are. And it also doesn't change your ability to have an amazing impact on the world around you. So that's really what my hope is, that everyone that goes through that program comes to the realization of that. And everybody's on a different journey. Everybody's dealing with different physical challenges. But at the end of the day, I think everyone in the program deals with that connection of the way that their body's operating to their self-worth. And that's really that's a connection that I want to break for people. So I'm so glad to hear that that's been super successful for you. And I know that I'm sure there's times where things still come up and you're not like, this perfectly zen person all the time that never reacts to anything. But I think it's awesome to be able to have that experience and say, no, I do actually get to decide how I'm going to respond to this. And I don't have to just go into autopilot, like freaking out because somebody made a comment about the way I looked.
Yeah. I think that that's definitely the most interesting piece of this is this having that control over your brain, because I think it's bizarre how you think you're in control and then your brain goes off on these tangents. And how did you get there? I didn't think I was the one who was controlling that. Somehow it all happened, and, all through, I just think that thinking about all these decisions way back when, had I known differently, obviously I am who I am now, but, gosh, it really helps me put into perspective of how to frame, my teaching to my kids as they grow up, because now I understand what needs to happen to help them.
Well, and I think, just generationally, you're going to be able to have that impact on them, and they'll see you now because they're still so young. I mean, by the time they're old enough to start making their own decisions, they'll see the way that you respond, and that'll help shape their response to things. And I just think it'll be a great ripple effect that you'll have on your kids and their kids. And just it's kind of, sometimes it can be a little scary to think about how the things that we choose to do make such a huge impact on the future in the way that who we get married to and the kind of kids that we raise, whether or not we have kids, all the things that can impact the future. But just seeing that as an opportunity to be your best self, so that way they have a great person to model after and a great influence on the way that they're responding to the world. And because I really do think your actions speak so much louder than your words, and the person that you're being is going to influence those around you more than the things that you say that you believe, or the accomplishments that you have. It's really who you're being that's going to change the environment around you. So I feel like that ability to see the old way of thinking happening and to say, no, I'm going to choose to not think that way anymore. I have this new way of thinking that I'm going to practice. Eventually that becomes your typical way. And again, you get to have that impact on your kids and your spouse and your coworkers and your friends, that kind of thing. So I think it's super exciting to see just the amount that you've changed in the last year and a half. And I know it's going to be a continued journey for you, but you've made so much progress. So, and not to say that as oh, you still have so much to do, but I think we all do. I mean, we always have stuff that we can, improvements or growth that we can experience. So, I would love to talk a little bit about what's going on now and what you see as, the immediate future, because again, the whole goal of this program is to get you to a place where your food and fitness and self-care choices are fueling your bigger purpose. And so what do you believe is your purpose for the season of life that you're currently in?
I mean, I think that I would be really amiss if I said that my purpose has to be my family right now. It is my family, and raising children that are virtuous and loving and good people. That I can't think of anything more important in my life right now. What I'm doing with my career, that's all good stuff, but raising humans that will make a mark on society in their own way is so critical. And I'm just so blessed to have the opportunity, and scared too, of course. But, as mentioned before, there was no way that I could be the best for them if I didn't feel the best for them either. So, learning what I've learned, being able to pass that on, but also feel good, and keep a relationship that is is truly transparent and full of love is where I see my immediate future, or at least for the next 18 years or so. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's a lifetime, really. But I think part of that, and it kind of hit me the other day. Children are probably the biggest speakers of truth, because they don't really have filters. They don't understand what how to fake through society yet. And when one of them says to me, "Oh, you're the prettiest mom in all of Hollywood," that's real. They really believe that, and that's what I should be seeing. That's how they see me, and so yeah, it's true. For them, beauty is everything. It's not just how I look, but how I act to them and who I am. So I love that. And I really want to fulfill that for them.
Well, that's awesome. You're slightly tipping me more into the desire to have kids zone.
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's hard, but it's so awesome.
Yeah, I've been through some interesting experiences in the last week or two where people are saying either having kids totally changed my life and it's amazing, or they're like, oh, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I was like, where am I? I don't know. So I like hearing when someone can express motherhood as being something that is so valuable, and it's not just saying how hard it is or that kind of thing. So I know it's hard. I'm not saying that you're not having a challenge to be a mom, and I know that there's no moms out there that don't experience challenge, but I think it's great when you can look at it as an opportunity and an ability to experience life through a child's eyes, which I think is really valuable when it comes to learning how to see the world differently through our own eyes, since we do have so much of that societal influence over the last 30, 40 plus years of life. It's nice to be able to be like, oh, this is how people act when they don't have all this baggage and they don't have all this negative beliefs that are in their brain yet. So I think you're doing a great job keeping them protected from that, and hopefully they'll be at an advantage to where people like you and me were when we were in our teens. So other than being a mom, which I know is a number one priority in your life right now, what other kind of impact do you hope to have on the world around you?
It's simple. It's not, I don't see myself as having any great change or movement in the world. I think we can make a great impact just in the way we live and being the example, right? Within your own home, within your own friends and family. There's a saint in the Catholic tradition. Her name is Saint Therese of Lisieux, and she has this. Her teaching was called The Little Way, and it's just small acts of love throughout your day and your life, and nothing big, but those small acts of love are, they change the world, because you provide that act of love to someone, and that person is changed just a little bit, and they can provide the act of love to somebody else. And I feel that just in providing an example, whether it's to my children and then they can be an example to their friends, or, I'm going on a girls' trip in a couple weekends, and I have a friend who's dealing with some pretty serious issues herself, physical things. And so if there's an opportunity for me to be an example to her somehow, then I will do that, or to pass on the information I know, or to be able to pass on your information, Laura, to her. That's an impact that I would like to have, is lead by example, even if it's in the smallest way.
Well, and I think a lot of times people, even they think it's something small, you don't realize the impact that you are having on somebody else when you're showing up as yourself and you're showing up in your best state, which is, again, why I love doing the work that I do, because I know that you being more physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy means that you're going to be able to show up for other people in a different way, and that you can have a huge impact on their life, even with things that you might consider to be small. So I just think it's really awesome to imagine this ripple effect from everything that we do. Touching one person is then going to touch other people. And it's just this web of effect that we can have. So even though you might think it's a small thing, I think recognizing the power that other people have had in your life from small things can give you even more, I don't want to say motivation, but just the desire to do things even when they feel small, knowing that it could have an impact that you would never have even expected. So I love that idea. And, I think, again, that always excites me to know that because you have had this experience that you now can affect other people in a positive way, even more than you would have been able to if you were still kind of stuck in that like physically unwell, kind of mentally, I'm trying to think like just mentally, I don't know if the word is suppressed, but it's almost like handicapped. Like if you're constantly thinking negative things about yourself, you honestly can't show up for other people the way that you could because you're so focused on like what's wrong with you. So I know that you're going to have such an amazing impact on others now that you have a more healthy sense of self and self-worth that you know isn't coming from your body. So I'm stoked about it. I think that sounds amazing. And I just have a couple more questions for you because we've talked a lot about this concept of getting help even when you're a super I don't want to say self-sufficient. I actually hate the word self-sufficient because I don't believe in self-sufficiency. Like I believe that there's people out there that have different capabilities. And I also know, having been through the types of coaching that I've done, that all the people I look up to, they're all being coached. So I actually don't believe that anybody is able to be self-sufficient. I think the people who are the most successful actually are the ones that rely on others the most. But all of that said, I know that you're a very capable person. You're very intelligent and you're an action taker. So we've talked about how joining a coaching program was something that it was a little bit outside your comfort zone, but it was something that ended up being a huge value to you beyond maybe what you would have expected. What would you say to someone who is considering investing in coaching, but thinks, oh, well, I should be able to do this myself. If I shouldn't need help, or I shouldn't need to invest money in getting help with this.
Yeah, it's funny because it is a tough question because there's just that. Oh, I can do this myself. And I guess that my first question to that person would be, well, have you done it yourself? Really? Because if you can do it yourself, then, where has that led you to this point? And ultimately, a little bit tongue in cheek, but the reality is you can't take it with you. So you know what? Spend your money, because, if it means a difference between, you being in a state where you are right now, the status quo, whether you're feeling great or feeling poorly, well, probably not feeling great, but feeling poorly or having difficulty, focusing on the things that are more important in life, or at least getting your life on track, is that where you want to be in the status quo? Or you can't take it with you. So now you have the opportunity for a whole change that could mean a difference, a world of a difference in your life. I have a few people in my mind right now that I think ultimately they have to come to the decision themselves. But if you're at the place you are now and you've been doing it yourself and you still aren't where you want to be, then sorry to say, but do you really think that keep on doing yourself is going to make that much of a difference? Mm-hmm. And it's okay. And I think a lot of us, especially women, we have this fear of showing weakness, and weakness is a good thing because, first of all, we're human. And if we have a weakness, that means that we can lean into that weakness and, grow and become stronger through that. I don't know how to really express that feeling, but it allows you to connect, and weaknesses allow us to connect with other people. And you think about all the people on Facebook that you read, they've had these perfect lives, and you're like, I don't want to talk to that person. Really? I mean, come on. That's why we shouldn't really focus too much on Facebook. But that's the idea. Like you connect through the times of suffering and the times of weakness, and you think, okay, I'm weak, and this is a place where I could use some help. And it's very hard to get to that point because we don't like it. But gosh, if you could look forward in the future and say, wow, I feel great now, how do you convince somebody that that's what they need to do?
Right. Yeah. Hindsight's a lot more clear than when you're in it. And especially one of my mentors, James Wedmore, is a business mentor, and he's always talking about, he quotes Einstein, and I'll maybe not get the exact quote, but it's something like, you can't solve a problem from the level of thinking that created the problem. And so it's like, if you're in the problem, you might not even see that this is something that like needs a different way of thinking. And that's where having a coach or a mentor can come in and be like, hey, what have you thought about it this way? Or like asking you the kind of questions that get your brain out of that little box that it's been in for 30, 40 plus years, however old you are. And that's where the problems get solved, is by thinking about them from a different level. And yeah, sometimes you can do that by yourself. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to read books or listen to podcasts and all that. But my experience is that unless you're fully invested in learning and growing and the development process, it either takes a lot longer to get to where you want to be, or you never get there because you never have given yourself the opportunity to step outside what your normal way of thinking is or normal way of operating is. So I know it's like trying to describe like what your life is like after doing something that the person who's in your like before situation can't even imagine going through. It's hard, but there's a reason that I think coaching is so valuable, and it's because I've worked with my own coaches and I've experienced the benefit of coaches, and I've seen what's possible not only in my life, but also in the lives of the other people that are in the program with me. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know where any of us would be if this person didn't step out and create this business to be a coach. So I just think it's really, it's hard to explain, but once you've gotten a taste of it, I'm like a coaching addict now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want help with everything. And like I said, the people that I look up to that are the most successful, honestly, all of them have help in some way. They have their own coach. They have a team that's working with them on their business. They have help at home. Like they get housekeeping or whatever it is. Like they are professional help receivers. So I'm like, have no problem with the idea of getting help with something, because I'm like, listen, the more you can help me, the faster I can make progress, and then the better my life will be, and then the more impact I can have on others, because I'm not sitting here struggling with something I should have fixed 3 years ago. So that's how I look at it. And I feel like even with being a mom, I know a lot of the women I talk to, they're afraid to spend money on themselves because it's uncomfortable, and they're like, oh, that money could go towards my children. And it's like, maybe we need to start thinking about like the kind of person that you're being around your children, and are you being your best self because of this issue that you're dealing with? And wouldn't it be worth spending some money to fix that problem so that you can be the mother that you know you're capable of being? And isn't that so much more valuable to your kids than money? Because money, in my mind, money is a renewable resource. We can always get more of it, but it's like, can you get more time with your kids? Can you get can you go back in time and like raise your kids differently from a different like mental perspective because you don't hate yourself anymore? Like, I just think there's so much to be gained. And whether that's the Fed and Fearless program or some other kind of program, like I kind of don't care. I just feel like people should see the value of coaching. And that's why I asked this question, because I know it's like, when I'm trying to explain it to someone, it's a little easier if it's someone who's been through it, as opposed to me who's like trying to convince someone that they should invest in a program that I'm selling. So I always think it's nice to see people who can speak for their own experience. So
yeah, I had a professor once said, you can't smell your own breath, and it's always that's a funny quote, but like it's true. You need the people around you and you need to be open to it, but you need people to be honest with what they're seeing. And sometimes it helps to have a significant other or close friend who just says, look, you need this, and saying this out of love. But also, we're as a society, we're so focused on making the best investment, your monetary investment, your stocks or whatever it is. And, what about the investment in yourself? Because isn't that ultimately what will get you to the point to being able to enjoy that investment that you've made with your stocks? It's this funny mindset in our society of self-help and self-reliance, yet don't actually invest in yourself, really. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a little bit of a challenge there in just opposing the forces around and saying, and a little bit of humility on the side of the, somebody who's thinking about it, like, okay, you know what? Yes, I just need this. It's tough. It's very tough. But, the truth is, you speak to people like me or other people in our group, in our cohort, and we all had beautiful experiences. So, at some point, these testimonies, they're real, right? So don't you want to feel like that?
Well, and like I said, I think once you get that experience of what it's like to be coached or to have a coaching program that you're in, it's like, you're just like, what else can I get help with? Or how else can I grow? It does tend, I don't want to say it gets addictive. It's not like legitimately addictive, but for me, I know, just the amount that I have personally invested, both money and time and energy, and physically traveling. And I just got back from a week in California at an event for personal development. And it's like, just seeing how much can come from that and seeing the ripple effect, not only in my own life, but in people like you, who stuff that I coached you through, stuff that I learned from my coach and that kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know, there's just something, I think you can't put a price tag on that. And sometimes it can be hard because it's like, oh, well, I can't see the actual physical return on the investment. Like, I don't see the dollars that I'm getting for this money that I'm putting in. But again, it's like, what's more valuable than you and your relationships and your quality of life? Because, there's plenty of people out there that are very wealthy, that are very unhappy. And it's like, holding on to your money at the expense of your well-being, I think is foolish. So it's nice to be able to, both of us have different coaching investment experiences, but for us to be able to be on that same page of like, yeah, it's, even though it can be a little scary, I actually think it's good if it's a little scary, because then you take it seriously and you actually get the results, and it's something that you really do make the most out of it. So anyway, I could talk to you for a long time. I very much enjoy this conversation, and I'm so glad that you were willing to come on and be honest and open with our listeners, since I know this is a very big leap for you. Do you have any final advice or words of wisdom for the women listening today?
Gosh, I think it just comes down to the real basic point that you're more than your body, and who you are and your potential is infinite, right? So let's be honest with ourselves and put aside the things that have been placed into our heads from the very beginning, and say, it's time to let go and be, reach that infinite potential. There's such great joy and peace in getting to that point, being on that journey, not on the journey that the scale's telling you, or that, your bad relationship has left you with. I think, what would the world look like if we were all on that journey towards that amazing potential?
That's a good point. I think that is something to ponder. And my final question for you is, what do you believe makes somebody more than a body?
Their place in God's plan. We all have a very unique place. And I once heard C.S. Lewis, or read in his book, I think it was called The Problem of Pain. He said, there is a U-sized shape in heaven, and God's waiting for you to fill it. And that means, wow, what does that really mean? And that's what makes you more than your body.
I love it. I always love a good C.S. Lewis quote. He's he's one of the best. So awesome. Well, Erika, I so appreciate you coming on here and sharing your time and being so open with our audience, and just being able to so eloquently share what you've been through and, the changes that you've experienced. And it's been such a blessing for me to be able to guide you and be a small part of that journey. So Thank you so much. I loved chatting with you, and I'm so looking forward to continuing to chat with you and work with you through the process of continuing this journey. But I think you've made an incredible amount of progress since a year and a half ago. Actually, it's almost 2 years ago, getting close. But just being able to watch the change that you've experienced has been amazing. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Laura. You've been an incredible coach, I will say.
Awesome. Well, it's only because I've been coached. I'm like just passing on the coaching. Basically, it's a big chain of coaching that's coming from I don't even know who. But anyway, it's been awesome hanging out with you all, and we will look forward to seeing you here on the Fed and Fearless podcast next week. All right, take care, everybody. Are you a Christian woman who wants to learn how to replace negative self-talk with healthy spiritual truths, so you can honor God with the way you care for your body? Then I have a special invitation for you. Starting on Monday, December 30th, I'm hosting a special 5-day body confidence challenge called Faith Over Fear. In this challenge, I'll walk you through the 5 most important steps you need to take in order to eliminate negative self-talk and develop a faith-centered approach to food and fitness that creates confidence and positivity in your body. To register, go to fedandfearless.com/challenge and sign up now. We officially start on December 30th, and you don't want to miss any part of this challenge if you can help it. So go to fedandfearless.com/challenge to grab your spot. You'll get instant access to the challenge program, as well as an invitation to our exclusive private Facebook group where we'll be hosting everyone who's participating. I can't wait to help you use food and fitness to fuel your purpose. I'll see you there.